What are some of the biggest fantasy questions that we need to answer before the start of the season? We'll ask them right now on Fantasy Football Today Express. Oh, you can't do any clever hand gestures for Express like you did for 5, Dave.
What, just like holding up my hand? That was clever?
Yeah, it was very clever. You know,
that wasn't clever. That was dopey.
Well, no one else thought of it. Anyway, here we are.
If we can commit to doing like a train horn every single show of FFT Express, then I would do that.
Okay. I'll try to download that sound effect. So here, I got 4 questions to ask you. Let's talk about it. Who's going to be the top receiver in Buffalo? That's question number 1. That's one of the big questions we need answered. Who's going to be the top receiver in Buffalo?
Why is this episode of FFT Express different than other episodes of FFT Express? That's a great question. And I think a lot of people are assuming that Keon Coleman will rise to the occasion. But I would make the case for Khalil Shakir. I think he's a good short area target, very shifty. He's got good after catch speed, strictly good after catch speed. I wouldn't call him a burner. And he's got some chemistry built in already with Josh Allen, which Curtis Samuel doesn't have, Keon Coleman doesn't have. That's what training camp's for, and maybe that improves the situation for those two guys. But I think Shakir might be the best all-around wide receiver for Buffalo this season. Absolutely on my sleeper list. Would love to see some buzz generated for him. And maybe there's an outside chance he finishes top 2 on the team in targets this year. Him and Kincaid would probably be those top 2 guys. Apologies to the Coleman enthusiasts out there, but I think that Shakir is going to have an edge. Let's see what happens in training camp.
What do you think about Kincaid leading the team in receiving?
Oh, I think that if I were a sports book manager, that would be the favorite for me, would be Kincaid.
To lead the team in receiving. I think it's going to be pretty close. You know, that could be one of these situations where I've seen it like with the Packers in the past, not with Devontae Adams, but you have, well, I don't know. You have like 3 or 4.
I don't know when the Packers would have done it.
The Watson-Lazard year, 2 years ago.
Maybe.
But where you had like Aaron Jones and Watson, you had like a bunch of guys in the same target range fighting to be the number 1 wide receiver. You wouldn't expect a running back to lead the team in receiving, though. All right. And Dave said that was a great question. I just want you to know that he came up with that one. Second question here is who will be the Cowboys' lead running back? And I will tell you, Dave Richard, I drafted Rico Dowdle this morning in a draft, and I was pumped. That's my hope. Who's going to be the Cowboys' lead running back?
This is another great question, and I think getting Dowdle with a late pick does make plenty of sense. I mean, he's younger than Ezekiel Elliott. Maybe he's a little bit more fluid than Ezekiel Elliott, certainly a little bit more agile. Let's see what happens in this backfield. We know that Zeke's going to be a part of it unless he just has an absolutely miserable camp and the Cowboys move on from him. But I think Dallas's best running back might not even be on the roster yet. So this is something to keep an eye on for sure. It is a huge training camp question. We've been asking all offseason who the best Cowboys running back is going to be. That's a running back we'd like to have in fantasy because the offensive line's good and the offense is good. And they need somebody back there who can put up some numbers for fantasy managers. I don't think we'd feel good if it was Zeke. I don't know how good we'd feel if it was Rico Dowdle. But when we're drafting these guys and it's going to be after 100th overall, they both make sense. At least you start with them on your bench to begin the year and just kind of wait and see what happens. But this is a team that probably adds another running back before the season starts.
Yeah, to think this was the highest scoring team in football last year, and we don't even know. And not only do we not know who their starting running back is, we're not that excited. I know I just said I was pumped to take Rico Dowdle, but I took him 166th overall.
Right. That's why you were pumped. You wouldn't have been pumped if you took him at 100th overall.
Well, no, but 166th overall in the Scott Fishbowl, Superflex tight end premium. Some kickers have already gone. That's probably like 120th overall or something like that. And I'd be fine with Rico Dowdle there in a regular league.
Around 10-ish.
Yeah, something like that. But yeah, right. It is weird, the opportunity here. I just know that Ezekiel Elliott is not a good running back anymore. I'm confident saying that. So I feel like Dowdle could beat him out. We will come right back after this word from our sponsors and ask 2 more questions on FFT Express. Well, we got some injured players going into 2024, and they are, among the others, Jonathon Brooks, Nick Chubb, and TJ Hockenson. Coming off torn ACLs, can Jonathon Brooks, Nick Chubb, and or TJ Hockenson be second half league winners?
Definitely. To me, that's an easy question to answer because I don't expect them to be on their respective lists, NFI, PUP, for the entire year. I think they'll come off of them at some point, and then maybe they'll need a couple of weeks to adjust. And then fingers crossed, in the case of Chubb and Hockenson, they'll be what they once were. And in the case of Brooks, he'll be given the opportunity to be the main guy in Carolina's backfield. And maybe Carolina's offense won't be as crappy as it was last year. But we need to see what happens in training camp. How many weeks are they going to be on the NFI list or the PUP list? They can practice, but they can't go full go. They certainly can't participate in team drills. And there's just going to be some adjustment periods for them. The sooner that they're off their respective lists, and this is the case for all three of them, the better that it'll be for fantasy. That goes without saying. And the sooner that their fantasy stock will go up. Pay close attention to who's working out and who's just standing around in shorts with a red jersey on and maybe doing individual drills, like half of the individual drills. Once we get an idea of who might be close to coming off those lists, that's when you pounce in drafts. That's when you go and you buy the dip before the dip is gone. All three of them could be awesome come mid-November all the way through the fantasy playoffs.
I'm going to go ahead and disagree. I don't think this is an easy one to say, could they be fantasy contributors? Yeah, sure. Could they be guys that you're starting most weeks? Could they be league winners? I'm skeptical of players coming off torn ACLs, especially Nick Chubb. It was such a bad injury. And Hockenson, I don't think he could be. I don't really think I would have drafted much Hockenson this year, even if he were fully healthy, didn't have a knee injury, because when Kirk Cousins was the quarterback and Jefferson and Addison were both healthy, Hockenson wasn't really being targeted as much as we'd like. For a league winner, I don't see him getting back to that with maybe an iffy passing game. And assuming Addison is playing by the time Hockenson gets back, there could be a suspension for Addison. We don't know. I don't really see it for him. Brooks, I guess I would have the most hope for, but he might be on the worst offense of the three. So I'm not drafting them as second half league winners. I'm not doing that. I'm not assuming it. I'll tell you that, Dave.
You shouldn't do it with like a top 60 or 70 pick without question. That's maybe for Brooks, you might, but I think it's a little risky at this point. By the way, the first 5 games last year for Minnesota, Jefferson's healthy, Cousins is healthy. Hockenson averaged almost 8 targets per game.
I feel like it was consistent, because I remember going through this game log here. Jefferson, Cousins, Addison, all healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was pretty consistent.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what, Dave? He wasn't really that good. He had one big game where he scored 2 touchdowns. That's the thing. Like, TJ Hockenson is not a very efficient tight end. He's benefited from being in some good situations. He had 9 targets, 35 yards. 8 targets, 66 yards, 2 touchdowns. Then he had a big game against the Chargers. Then he had 3 target game against the Panthers, 5 catches, 51 yards on 8 targets. Like, he had one big game out of 5, averaging 8 targets per game.
I get it.
Yeah. All right.
And now it's the quarterback change, so that'll make people nervous about Hockenson as well.
Last question. Are fantasy managers going to go gaga over kick and punt return yards?
Yeah, I think there will be an overreaction to that. The truth is that no one really knows how it's going to go, how often teams are going to have a good strategy for kicking to the other team, whether or not they just kick it out of the end zone and have a touchback, who's going to be returning. I think teams are going to play that very close to the vest on who will be the kick return guy for their teams. If it's like, we know that Rashid Shaheed is that guy for New Orleans, Tank Dell wants to be that guy for Houston, and then there's a line outside of Mike McDaniel's office for people in Miami to do it. We have no idea. The play is going to be very different from anything that we've seen on NFL special teams before. And I think it's too much to rush to judgment on who will be that guy, who the best guys will be, and whether or not they'll even get those opportunities. So I would not bake that into your drafting plan just yet.
And I'll tell you one thing. I don't think that you can reward a touchdown, points for a touchdown, to a player that you roster that returned a kick or a punt and also a special teams unit. It's got to be one or the other, right? I mean, if Rashid Shaheed scores a kick return touchdown and you have him and the Saints DST, there is no way you should get the double points for that.
Well, it depends on the league and what the league wants to do.
That's what I would say.
It sounds kind of fun. It's more points that way.
I mean, you could just start factoring it into special teams units. But I want to see if fantasy managers, basically what I'm saying is, do fantasy managers want to go there? Do they want to chase kick and punt return yards, or do they just like the way fantasy is right now, just drafting skill position players and not getting into that. We'll see who's, how deep people want to go. Dave, we got to end Fantasy Football Today Express right there. We'll come back and talk to you tomorrow. Thanks a lot, everybody.